Night fell differently on the steppe, not with silence, not with peace, but with the uneasy stillness of an empire that sensed something was wrong. Fires burned across a vast dominion, from frozen forests to desert trade routes. Yet beneath Mongol encampments, a quiet terror spread. The greatest war machine the world had ever seen was no longer united. Its enemies had not done this. Its own blood had. For decades, the empire forged by Genghis Khan had expanded with unstoppable momentum. Kingdoms collapsed like dry grass before a storm. Cities that defied the Mongols vanished. Civilizations bent the knee. Unity was their weapon, discipline their shield, fear their herald. But now, the threat did not ride from beyond the horizon. It emerged from within. The Mongol Empire was never meant to fracture. Its foundations were built on loyalty to a single ruling lineage, guarded by tradition. Yet succession, who would command the storm after a great Khan's death, was always the empire's most dangerous weakness. Power was seized through conquest, but it transferred through consensus, rivalry, and fragile alliances among descendants commanding armies. And consensus was beginning to rot. By the mid-13th century, the empire stretched farther than any before, but its vastness concealed growing instability. Beneath the appearance of Mongol supremacy lay an uncomfortable truth. The empire's unity depended on competing branches of the same family. One death could unsettle everything. One dispute could ignite catastrophe. When the throne of the great Khan became contested, the empire did not simply pause. It trembled. Rival claimants maneuvered across thousands of miles, gathering support, forging alliances, and calculating betrayals. Each prince understood the stakes. To lose was not merely to forfeit prestige. It could mean exile, erasure, or execution. But this time, the struggle would become something far worse than a political contest. It would become civil war. Two brothers stood at the center of the storm, Kublai Khan and Arik Bökegi, both grandsons of the founding lineage, both heirs to immense power, both convinced that destiny favored them alone. Their conflict was not inevitable, but it was nearly unavoidable. The empire they sought to rule was already drifting toward divergence. Regional identities hardened. Mongol elites developed distinct interests. The idea of a single indivisible empire was becoming harder to sustain with each passing year. Yet the title of Great Khan still carried immense symbolic authority. Whoever claimed it could legitimize dominance over all others. Neither brother would yield. When Kublai declared himself Great Khan, it was more than an announcement. It was a challenge. Arik Basti answered with a rival claim, igniting a fracture that cut through the heart of Mongol power. Princes chose sides. Armies mobilized. The empire that had conquered half the known world turned its fury inward. And the consequences were immediate. Trade routes destabilized. Garrisons hesitated. Command structures splintered. Mongol forces that once coordinated across continents now faced one another as enemies. The illusion of invincibility began to crack. For subject peoples, it was a moment of dangerous hope. For Mongol leaders, it was existential dread. Because this was not a rebellion. This was the empire devouring itself. Battles between the brothers' supporters were brutal, fueled by personal loyalty and dynastic hatred. Resources that had once powered expansion were redirected into internecine destruction. Each victory deepened resentment. Each defeat hardened resolve. The conflict stretched across years, bleeding strength from the imperial core. Yet the most devastating damage was not measured in casualties. It was psychological. The Mongol Empire's dominance had always rested on an aura of unstoppable unity. Civil war shattered that myth. Allies doubted. Rivals calculated. Subjugated regions sensed vulnerability. The terrifying coherence gave way to fragmentation. An empire that ruled through fear could not afford to appear divided. but divided it was. Far from the battlefields, the imperial capital of Karakorum became a symbol of the struggle's deeper meaning. Whoever controlled the seat of authority could claim legitimacy. Yet legitimacy itself was losing coherence. Competing courts, rival administrations, fractured loyalties, the very concept of centralized rule was eroding. The Civil War was not just about who would wear the crown. It was about what the empire even was anymore. As years passed, exhaustion began to replace ambition. Warfare drained supplies, fractured alliances, and weakened the web of relationships. Even victory carried a bitter taste. The cost of dominance was mounting beyond calculation. And still, neither side could retreat without risking annihilation. When Arik Beg's position finally collapsed, it did not feel like triumph. It felt like survival. Kublai emerged as the dominant figure, but the empire he inherited was irreversibly altered. Unity was fatally wounded. The Civil War had not destroyed the empire in a single cataclysm. It had done something more insidious. It had changed its trajectory forever. The Mongol world would never again function as a truly unified entity. Instead, it drifted into autonomous khanates, each pursuing its own interests, alliances, and destinies. The idea of a single great Khan commanding universal loyalty faded into ceremony and memory. What external enemies could not accomplish through decades of resistance, internal rivalry achieved with terrifying efficiency. Fragmentation. The irony was devastating. The empire born from unprecedented military coordination began to unravel, not from defeat, but from competing claims to absolute power. Its greatest strength became its greatest vulnerability: bloodline, ambition, succession. Even Kublai's reign, powerful as it was, reflected this transformation. His focus shifted toward consolidating rule in China, embedding Mongol authority within a new imperial framework rather than restoring universal dominance. The center of gravity moved. The imperial identity evolved. The dream of seamless continental unity receded. The Civil War had not merely threatened the empire's survival, it had redefined its limits. Historians often search for dramatic endings, decisive battles, spectacular collapses, unmistakable turning points. But the near destruction of the Mongol Empire did not arrive as a single apocalyptic event. It unfolded through mistrust, rivalry, and slow corrosion. An empire does not always fall when its armies are defeated. Sometimes it falls when its leaders stop believing in the same future. The Mongol Empire remained vast, influential, and formidable long after the Civil War. But something essential had vanished. The terrifying sense of indivisible unity, the force that had once made resistance seem futile, could never be fully restored. Because once an empire reveals that it can fracture, the world never forgets, and neither do its rulers. In the end, the conflict between brothers became more than a dynastic struggle. It became a warning etched into the psychology of power itself. No empire, no matter how vast, no matter how feared, is immune to the most ancient and destructive force in political history: internal division. The Mongols had conquered kingdoms, crushed armies, and redrawn the map of the known world. Yet the event that came closest to destroying their empire did not ride beneath foreign banners. It rode beneath their own.